It has been a year since my daughter and her husband started living with us, and I now have a lovely grandchild, John. Today is the day John will meet my mother-in-law for the first time. My husband Jason returned home, guiding his mother by the hand.
Everyone, I brought Mom with me.
Oh, welcome, Grandma.
My daughter Amy, who had been very attached to her grandmother since childhood, had been hoping that her newly born child could be held by her. My mother-in-law and we live separately. Considering her old age and future health, we couldn't help but worry, but it was all out of consideration for her condition. My mother-in-law has been highly sensitive to spirits since birth and seems to find places with many people too overwhelming because she feels too much. Amy's eyes sparkled with anticipation at her long-awaited arrival. I had been soothing John and walked towards my mother-in-law encouraged by Amy's expectant gaze. Thank you for coming all the way. This is your great-grandchild. I was about to say, but the words never left my mouth. At that moment, my mother-in-law clutched her chest and began to suffer.
Ugh.
What? What's wrong? Just a moment ago, she had been smiling warmly, but as soon as she saw John, her eyes widened in shock, and she collapsed to the ground. What's wrong? Are you okay?
It hurts. I can't breathe. That child is no good.
My mother-in-law was desperately trying to say something. In stark contrast, John, in my arms, continued to laugh innocently. My name is Nancy. I used to work as a caregiver, but now I'm retired and live with my husband Jason, and my daughter's family. Our peaceful life together as a family of 4 is very fulfilling, but there are a few things that worry me. Amy, who was sipping coffee leisurely, sighed with regret.
I wish Grandma could live with us.
Yes, currently, we live separately from my mother-in-law. She turned 91 this year. Given my background in caregiving, I can't help but feel anxious about not being there to support her in her old age and what to do if something happens. Yes, but I remembered how my mother-in-law reacted when we suggested living together.
I prefer being alone and want to spend my time at my own pace.
It's her decision, so there's nothing we can do. Despite being 91, my mother-in-law is remarkably spry. Most of the postcards she sends us during the seasons describe her achievements in mountain climbing. She once told me that she enjoys mountain climbing and finds comfort in an environment where she can be surrounded by nature. And you know, mother-in-law seems to have strong spiritual sensitivity. She's especially sensitive to people's emotions. I reminisced with Amy over a slightly indulgent coffee. Do you remember, back when you were in kindergarten, there was a time when you went missing? Amy exclaimed in surprise.
What? Really?
She might not remember much from back then because she was so young. But at that time, my husband and I were desperately searching for our missing daughter, to the point where even strangers on the street offered to help. We called our neighbors, walked around the kindergarten and our neighborhood, searching frantically, but we couldn't find you. Then Jason suggested talking to his mother. When we did, It was more than 10 years ago, and my mother-in-law was even more energetic then. When we consulted her, she said,
That's terrible.
Then she quietly closed her eyes. I wondered what she was doing but felt a certain aura that told me not to interrupt, so I waited silently. A few seconds later, my mother-in-law clutched her chest as if she was feeling the pain herself and said,
She is in a dark place. She feels lonely and is in pain.
We focused our search on dark places as she said, and found Amy stuck in a hole by the neighborhood embankment, unable to move because she had twisted her ankle.
No way. I don't remember that at all.
When I asked her afterward how she knew, she said she just felt Amy's fear. As I finished the story, Jason, who had been quietly reading the newspaper, looked up with a nostalgic smile.
Yeah, I remember that.
So spiritual sensitivity is real. Grandma is amazing.
I had heard from Jason that my mother-in-law had spiritual sensitivity, but I didn't believe it until that incident happened. I don't have any spiritual sensitivity myself, and I thought such things were just fictional. However, my mother-in-law's behavior at that time made me feel she indeed had some supernatural power. Since then, I've been able to accept the strange things she says. Due to her sensitivity to other people's emotions, I couldn't strongly insist that she live with us. With such sensitivity, she would undoubtedly find living alone more comfortable. Living with others might prevent her from relaxing and could even make her ill. But I can't say that this situation is ideal. I sighed deeply, wondering what I should do. And my worries don't end there. Since Amy and her husband Harrison got married and started living with us a year ago, our front door has been vandalized with spray paint. More graffiti. One day, as I was going outside to weed the flower bed, I saw prominent fluorescent green graffiti on the front door. It was too much effort to clean up such extensive spray paint alone, so, as usual, I asked Jason for help. Jason, could you help me clean up the graffiti?
Oh, again? Just a moment.
The graffiti incidents have been frequent, and we still don't know who is doing it. We've even ended up with a graffiti removal kit in a bucket. This time it was just a messy spray on the door, but sometimes, there are clearly malicious messages like curse or I won't forgive.
Who on earth would do something like this?
We've asked our neighbors, but no one has seen the culprit. It's well known that our house has been targeted, and sometimes neighbors on their walks would knock on our door to inform us of new graffiti when we hadn't noticed it ourselves. If this continues, it will be impossible for my mother-in-law to feel at ease if we invite her to live with us. That's it, we should install a security camera, I suggested to Jason as we cleaned up the graffiti. We couldn't go on like this without resolving anything. We needed to take action. Jason nodded at my suggestion, and that very day, he went to the store, bought a security camera, and installed it. After the front door was vandalized again, we checked the camera footage. The incident occurred early in the morning when most people were asleep. The footage showed a man dressed entirely in black. Amy exclaimed,
That person!
"Do you know him?" It was hard to make out his face due to the mask and hat, but I was sure I didn't know him. However, as soon as Amy saw the footage, her face turned pale. When I asked if she knew him, Amy nodded.
I think it's Justin, a classmate from university. He confessed his feelings to me before I started dating Harrison. I turned him down, but he kept following me around.
I see. Recalling those days, Amy began to tremble. Harrison, Amy's husband, listened with a stern expression but comforted Amy by gently patting her back. It seemed that Justin's love for Amy had turned into hatred, leading him to commit these acts. Although I didn't know what had transpired between them, Amy wasn't the type to toy with someone's feelings. The sharpness, madness, and hatred in his eyes, even through the footage, sent chills down my spine. Sensing the same thing, Jason spoke in a stern tone.
We should contact the police. The graffiti is a nuisance, and it might escalate.
Yes, let's do that. It will be too late once something happens. We had enough evidence with the footage and photos of the graffiti. We decided to take the footage to the police. When we explained the situation, the police took it as a malicious act and gave the perpetrator a severe warning. As Amy had guessed, the culprit was Justin, who harbored intense hatred towards Amy and Harrison. Once his parents found out about his disruptive behavior, Justin quit his current job and returned to his hometown. After that, the graffiti incidents stopped, and we finally felt a sense of relief. Yet, an uneasy feeling lingered within me. Soon after, Amy discovered she was pregnant. She had recently been complaining about a lack of appetite despite not feeling unwell. Having received the news over the phone, I warmly welcomed Amy home from the hospital. Amy, congratulations.
Thank you, Mom.
From now on, you need to be careful about everything. No strenuous exercise, no heavy lifting, and take it easy at work.
The nurse told me that over and over.
It seemed she had heard it many times, but she couldn't hide her happiness. As we discussed the future, the living room door opened. Jason, who had been out, returned home.
If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Amy.
Jason must have heard our conversation outside the room, as he said this with a warm smile. Standing beside him was my mother-in-law, who also had a joyful expression. I had asked Jason to go and bring her over.
Congratulations, Amy.
Grandma!
When I called my mother-in-law in excitement, she was delighted and eager to visit. Her enthusiasm was clear even over the phone, making me so happy that I asked Jason to bring her over. My mother-in-law clasped Amy's hands tightly, tears welling up in her eyes.
You'll go through some tough times, but a cute baby will be born. It's something to look forward to. It's wonderful to live long enough to see my great-grandchild's face.
Amy nodded happily at her grandmother's encouragement. It's wonderful to have a cute baby. Is that your intuition?
Oh, it's not intuition. Just a little dream of a great-grandmother.
When I asked, my mother-in-law playfully winked. Yes, you're right. No matter what, the baby will be adorable. As I silently regretted asking such a blunt question, I suddenly remembered the graffiti. By the way, do you remember the person who was vandalizing our house?
Yes, I remember.
We found out who it was and reported it to the police. The vandalism has stopped, so there's nothing to worry about anymore. Won't you live with us? Justin had returned to his hometown, and our neighbors were kind and peaceful people. There should be no more concerns for my mother-in-law. However, she shook her head firmly.
I wouldn't dream of intruding on your family's precious time together. I'm fine as I am.
But you're part of our family too. I tried to persuade her, but in the end, she didn't agree. After that, Amy's belly grew steadily, and without any major issues, she safely gave birth. The baby was a boy named John. He had a cute face, just like Amy. Remembering when I gave birth to Amy, and realizing that she had grown up to do the same, I was so moved that I cried. Amy wanted to show John to her grandmother immediately, but I persuaded her not to overexert herself right after giving birth, so the visit was scheduled for a month later. John is so adorable. Peekaboo. When I played with him, John laughed innocently. Today was the day John and his great-grandmother would meet for the first time. To help Amy recover after her hospital stay and to assist with the baby, I was as involved as possible. More than anything, the fact that I now had a grandchild filled me with immense joy.
Hee hee,
John already loves you, Mom.
I'm glad to hear that. Thinking that I was now a grandmother was deeply moving. As I chatted with Amy and played with John, Jason returned with my mother-in-law.
Here they are, both of you. I brought Mom.
Oh, welcome, Grandma.
Amy had wanted her grandmother to hold John since the day he was born. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation at the long-awaited appearance of her grandmother. Responding to Amy's expectant gaze, I approached my mother-in-law while holding John. "Mother, this is your great-grandson John," was what I intended to say, but the words never left my mouth. Because at that moment, my mother-in-law clutched her chest and began to suffer.
Uck.
What? What's wrong? She had been smiling just moments ago, but as soon as she saw John, her eyes widened, and she collapsed to the ground. What's wrong? Are you okay?
It hurts. It hurts. It's painful. That child. No.
What do you mean? John is no good.
Sweat was beading on her forehead as if she was really in pain. It was clear something was seriously wrong. Worried, I looked at John in my arms, but he was just laughing innocently at the commotion around him. We tried to comfort my mother-in-law by rubbing her back and helping her sit down, but her complexion did not improve. I told Amy to wait as I guided my mother-in-law to another room, and she seemed to recover a little.
I'm sorry. Could I go home today? Please don't misunderstand. It's not John's fault.
I understand. I'll take you home. Although it was unfortunate for Jason, who had brought her, and Amy, who had been looking forward to today, I couldn't leave my suffering mother-in-law in this state. I decided to take her home as she requested. Are you feeling better now?
Yes. I'm much better. I'm sorry.
My mother-in-law's home was in a place at the foot of a mountain, somewhat removed from the residential area. There were few houses and little foot traffic around, which seemed to help her feel more at ease. She sighed in relief. There's no need to apologize. But what happened earlier? My mother-in-law doesn't have any chronic illnesses. For her to suddenly clutch her chest in pain, there must be a cause other than illness. I offered her a warm cup of tea to help her relax and asked. However, she seemed reluctant to recall the moment. She averted her eyes and spoke hesitantly.
Well. When I looked at that child, I felt an overwhelming sense of fear.
A sense of fear. Seeing her in apparent pain gave me a bad feeling. It was the same feeling that had been lingering ever since we caught the graffiti culprit and thought the danger had passed. The fear she mentioned must be related to her spiritual sensitivity. If her sensitivity reacted the moment she saw John. Suppressing my anxiety, I immediately called Jason. Hi, Jason. Could you and Harrison take a look around the neighborhood?
What's going on?
He sounded surprised, probably because he was reading the newspaper. My sudden request took him off guard. I have a really bad feeling. There might be someone suspicious around. Please, can you check?
All right. We'll do that.
Jason had grown up aware of his mother's spiritual sensitivity, likely more attuned to it than I was. Understanding my concern, he quickly called Harrison and told Amy to stay inside before heading out. As I heard the front door open over the phone, my heart began to race uncontrollably.
I'll call you if anything comes up.
With that, Jason ended the call. But in the next moment, Jason's shout echoed through the call.
Hey!
What are you doing there?
I heard the sound of Jason's hurried footsteps, followed by angry voices clashing with an unfamiliar one, and the harsh sound of metal scraping against metal.
I won't forgive you. Amy, you betrayed me and even had a child. Don't think you can be happy.
What came through the phone was not Jason's usual calm voice, but the voice of a man filled with hatred and malice. Jason. What's happening? Jason. I clung desperately to the phone, but the noise made it impossible to understand what was going on. After the tumultuous sounds, the line eventually fell silent. While I was calling Jason from my mother-in-law's house, Jason spotted Justin lurking in the shadows of our home. Justin was armed with multiple knives. It was clear what he intended to do. With anger flaring, Jason and Harrison confronted Justin, who seemed ready to lash out. Luckily, Harrison had experience in karate, and they managed to subdue Justin without anyone getting hurt. The police were called immediately, and Justin was finally arrested. Even as he was being taken away, Justin directed his rage at Amy, blaming her.
Amy, it's all your fault. You traitor!
It was evident that he had been harboring a deep grudge against Amy. It's thanks to you. Truly, thank you very much. If you hadn't noticed, who knows what would have happened by now. After the incident had settled, I visited my mother-in-law's house again. The reason Amy and John were safe this time was largely because of her. The pain she felt at that time was the intense hatred Justin directed toward John. When I bowed my head with a gift in hand, she shrugged her shoulders modestly as always.
You're exaggerating. I didn't do anything. It was Nancy who took action and everyone who caught the culprit.
No, that's not true. If you say it's thanks to everyone, you are included in that everyone. I was truly glad they were safe. Just thinking about what could have happened to newborn John or Amy, who was struggling with her first child, made me shudder. We comforted each other and felt a sense of relief. However, one day, when it seemed like the incident had settled, the intercom at home rang with a foreboding sound. Yes, who is it? Given it was after the incident, I thought it might be the police or the mail carrier, so I opened the front door without much thought. But in the next moment, I regretted it.
Hello! You should remember the name Justin. This is Amy's residence, correct?
There stood a couple with eerie, thin smiles whom I did not recognize. Justin.
We apologize for the trouble our foolish son has caused.
There they were, the parents of Justin, who had plotted to harm Amy and John. Why had they come to our home? How did they even know our address when we weren't acquaintances? A cold premonition ran down my spine.
We wanted to apologize directly to Amy and John, so we came in person. May we come in?
What are these people saying? We never want to have anything to do with the culprit again. Besides, it seemed unnatural for the parents to come to apologize in person right after the incident. Isn't that something to be handled through lawyers or the police? There was no way I would let these two meet Amy and John. Excuse me, but my daughter has suffered a deep emotional wound. In her current state, I cannot possibly let her meet with you. Please leave. Justin's mother replied.
Please don't say that. We only wish to apologize.
She leaned in toward me and placed her hand on the front door, which I had started to close. Her persistent calm smile sent a shiver down my spine. No, that's quite unnecessary. An apology from you holds no value whatsoever. If you truly care about my daughter, Please do not involve yourselves with her ever again. As I firmly stated this, Justin's mother widened her eyes in surprise. Then suddenly, she let out a loud, shrill scream that could likely be heard by the neighbors.
Oh my. I knew my instincts were right. To think that my dear son might have married the daughter of such a rude person is horrifying. I was wondering what kind of person would reject my son. It must be your daughter who has the problem. She must have deceived my son.
Excuse me. Disturbed by her drastic change in demeanor, I promptly shut the door and locked it again. If she causes us any more trouble, I'll call the police. With this in mind, I gripped my phone tightly, feeling cold sweat down my back. Though Justin's parents patiently lingered in front of the door for a while, they eventually gave up and left quietly. I collapsed in relief. Even though the culprit had been caught, it might still be too soon to feel safe. I decided to share this incident with my family. Actually, Justin's parents came over today.
What?
I began in a stern tone during dinner when everyone was gathered. Amy immediately looked worried and turned pale, and both Jason and Harrison furrowed their brows. They said they wanted to come in to apologize directly to Amy and John, but I sent them away.
No way!
From that couple, I didn't feel any genuine intention to apologize at all. I couldn't understand what they were thinking, and I could only describe them as unsettlingly eerie. Sensing the darkening mood, Jason spoke up decisively to lighten the atmosphere.
Maybe we should move. It's not good that they know our address.
I think so too. This place is very comfortable to live in, but the fact that Justin and his parents know our address always makes us anxious. It might be fine now, but it might not be in the future. When I nodded,
And besides,
Jason added,
Nancy, you've been worried about my mom, right?
"What, you mean?" Jason winked as if he understood everything I had been concerned about. In moments like this, he really reminded me of his mother. "Why don't you come live with us after all?" After successfully moving, I visited my mother-in-law's house once again. This house is very quiet and perfect for spending one's twilight years alone, but it seemed a bit too lonely. The new place is in a nature-rich area, and I'm sure you'll like it. Besides, through this recent incident, I realized something. Until now, I had thought I needed to support my mother-in-law unilaterally. Deep down, I saw her as someone I should take care of. But that's not all. Our family can help each other, regardless of any differences in our roles. It's more enjoyable for a family to be together. Having you around would make Amy and John feel secure. I truly relied on her. That was my honest feeling. When I said this earnestly, my mother-in-law smiled softly, as if she understood everything.
You're stubborn, Nancy.
So are you.
That might be true.
We started laughing quietly, finding the situation amusing. As kindred spirits, we would be able to get along well from now on.
Yes. Taking care of great-grandchildren might not be so bad.
And so, the series of events came to an end, and my mother-in-law came to live with us in our new home. From now on, we will live peacefully and harmoniously as a four-generation family. However, no one yet knows that John will grow especially attached to his great-grandmother, leaving Harrison and Amy to lament this development in the future.